Okay, have you ever imagined having your own superpower? Like actual endless strength? Or maybe magic? Well, let's dive right into this explainer because today we're exploring a really fascinating ancient text that talks about unlocking a real life equivalent to the greatest superpower ever. It describes tapping into what it calls the fullness of God. But what does that actually mean for us? Get ready because we're going to break this down so it makes perfect sense, and you'll discover how this endless superpower is something you can actually use every single day.
So, if you had to guess, what would you say is the absolute most powerful thing in the universe? A massive black hole out in space? Or maybe a billion lightning bolts all crashing down at the exact same time? The source text we're looking at reveals something completely different. It tells us that the ultimate power isn't a laser beam or a rocket ship. It's actually an endless supply of love. And not just your average, everyday love, but a very specific, incredibly powerful kind. There's this famous quote from the book of Ephesians, and it talks about knowing the love of Christ, which passeth knowledge. Now, that phrase, passeth knowledge, basically means this love is so gigantic, so deep, and so amazing that it goes way past what our normal brains can even handle. Seriously, it's like trying to count all the tiny grains of sand on a beach. Your brain just can't fit it all in. And the text says that when we start to understand this huge love, we get filled with all the fullness of God. Okay, so how do we actually get this power? The devotional text explains that through faith and through Jesus, we basically get a direct VIP pass right to God's throne. Imagine God's throne as the ultimate, never-ending charging station for your heart. Think about when your tablet runs completely out of battery. You have to plug it into the wall to get the screen to light up again, right? Well, this text is telling us that we have a VIP pass to the biggest charging station in the whole universe, where infinite power is always there to light us up. And the crazy thing is, the promise of this power comes down to one really simple but massive word, all. The source points to a promise in the Bible, Romans 8:32, which says that because God didn't hold back his own son, he will freely give us all things. Not just some things, not just a few things, absolutely everything we need to grow, to be strong, and to be kind. It means you literally never have to worry about the power running out. But here is where things get truly mind-blowing. The text introduces what we can call the magic rule of sharing. Usually, if you have a piece of candy and you give it away to a friend, well, you don't have candy anymore, right? But the power of God's love works by a totally different, almost magical set of rules. If you try to just keep all this love to yourself, it's like a normal battery. Eventually, it just drains out and sits there. But the text says that as you impart or share this love with other people, you actually receive it back in a much richer and more abundant measure. It multiplies. The more kindness you give away to your friends, your family, or even just someone who's having a rough day, the more your own heart gets filled right back up. It's a superpower that literally gets stronger the more you use it. Once you taste this kind of love, your heart actually cries out for a deeper draft. Think of it like drinking from a magic cup. You take a big sip of cool water because you're super thirsty, but instead of the cup emptying out, it suddenly refills itself with even more water. You ask for more, and the answer you get back from God is much more. It's this endless supply that just keeps growing as you learn and love. Now, if we want to really understand how to use this superpower, we need to look at the perfect playbook. The text points us directly to the ultimate role model, the life of Jesus Christ. The author tells us his whole life was completely charged with this divine message of love. So if we want to know what it looks like to be walking around with the fullness of God, all we have to do is look at how Jesus acted. Let's check out a couple of the specific qualities the text highlights. First up is compassion. This just means caring deeply about someone who is hurting and actively wanting to help them out. The devotional source says that compassion literally beamed from his countenance. Now, countenance is just a fancy old word for face. This means Jesus' face literally shined with this deep care for other people. People could just look at him and immediately see how much he cared about them. Next is humility. Humility means putting others first and not bragging about how great you are, even if you actually are great. The text says Jesus showed unparalleled humility, meaning no one in the entire history of the world has ever been as beautifully humble as him. Even though he had all the power in the universe, he didn't act like a bully or show off. He always acted like a helper. So here is your daily growth playbook. 1. Show compassion. 2. Give grace. 3. Practice humility. And 4. Speak truth. The text explains that if we want to join what it calls the church triumphant in heaven, which is basically the ultimate winning team, we have to practice these 4 exact qualities right now, today, on Earth. We're essentially in training right now, and this is our daily practice routine to grow our faith. And why do we do all this? Well, think about the number 1 for a second. The author points out that everything else we think is super important, like having the coolest toys, or winning a video game, or being the most popular kid, all of that suddenly shrinks down to absolutely nothing when we realize the depth of what God did. He gave his one and only begotten Son to show us this love. When you really get that, it just puts all your everyday worries right into perspective. The source calls this the mystery of God in the flesh, or divinity in humanity. I know, that sounds super complicated, but all it really means is that Jesus brought ultimate, perfect, heavenly power right down into our regular, everyday human lives. He showed us that you don't actually need to be a superhero with a cape to have divine power. You just have to be a human being who chooses to love perfectly exactly where you are.
So how does acting like Jesus and following this playbook actually help us grow and kind of level up in the end? Like, what is the final result of all this compassion and humility? Well, let's see what the source text promises. The final reward is absolutely amazing. The text says that because Jesus humbled himself first, because he actually bowed down to serve others, he now gets to lift us up. The word used there is exalt, which just means to lift up super high. Because we follow his example of humility, he promises to exalt us so we can actually sit with him upon his throne of infinite power. By bowing down to help others, we are the ones who actually end up being lifted up to the highest place. And that leads us straight to this massive promise, exceeding abundantly above all we ask or think. God wants to give us a spirit of wisdom that is so much bigger, wider, and deeper than our wildest imaginations could ever dream up. Literally, if you sit down right now and try to imagine the absolute best, most amazing gift ever, the text says what God has planned for you when you live out this love is even better than that. So as we wrap up this explainer, I've got a question for you to take with you. Who will you share God's infinite superpower love with today? Now that you know the charging station is always open and you know how this endless supply of love multiplies like magic when you give it away, who are you going to share it with first? Remember, the power never runs out. Keep that in mind today as you go out into the world.